From interviews to jail calls, Ditto Transcripts delivers fast, confidential, and court ready transcription for law enforcement agencies. Ditto is CJIS compliant and is already working with agencies all over the U.S., including the Washington State Patrol and the National Park Service Investigations Unit. Get started now at dittotranscripts.com. That's dittotranscripts.com. To hear details about all the applications of Ditto Transcripts and exactly why this is a key solution for your organization's workload issues, check out episode 232. We often talk about service and identity beyond the badge. Valor Technical Cleaning is a veteran-owned, nationwide biohazard remediation company hiring active and retired officers for business development roles. With Valor, you can build relationships with local agencies and continue to foster care for the community following tragedy. Continue serving, just in a new way. Visit valortechnicalcleaning.com and click Careers. The views and opinions expressed by the host and guests of this show do not represent their employing agency, department, or organization. All information should be regarded as anecdotal, contextual, and educational, and should not be misinterpreted as legal or medical advice. Welcome to Blue Grit Radio, the podcast that explores making better cops for a better community. I'm your host, Eric Tung. I've been an active police officer since 2007. We will dive into the aspects of police culture, health and wellness, leadership, and mindset. You'll hear from experts not only from policing, but all industries as they relate to being our best with purpose, passion, and positivity. Join me as we share stories, lessons, and advice so we can all be better for ourselves, our teams, our families, and our communities. Here we go, episode 300. We've come a long way. We've spent a lot of time. If you've been here from the beginning, thank you. Thank you for your support, for sharing the show out, for helping these positive, constructive conversations, whether you're a first responder, a frontline responder, you're in the grind. I thank you so much for collaborating and sharing in this journey with me. If you're a newer listener, I thank you as well. Thanks for coming along. I invite you to, in your time and in your journey, go back through the episodes, click on what's resonating with you, whether it's specific themes, different titles, but I would also invite you to consider checking some random episodes because that may surprise you. A lot of the ones that aren't labeled as leadership episodes absolutely go into leadership. They go into mindset, development of self for development of others. So it may surprise you. It might be a nice little surprise as you explore. So 300. I was talking with somebody and they're like, man, when you started this thing, did you ever think that you'd get to episode 300? And I don't truly remember. So I didn't really know how to answer. I was like, well, you start something. Like, I don't remember thinking that I was going to stop unless it was just absolutely dismal. It has definitely not been absolutely dismal. And so I don't know what kind of attitude you want to call that. I just started the thing because I saw a value and I really appreciate all the friends I've made through this, people chiming in, emails, regardless of where you're at in career, or sometimes surprisingly and very validating to hear people and perspectives from outside of this type of career, whether it's police work or first responder work, and how the messages, how the conversation has resonated with them. Sometimes it's really helped people change their mind on how they view the profession of policing or those that do it, which is also definitely a goal and a theme, kind of a lower priority goal, because really I was trying to reach people where they would receive it. And a lot of times that is people in this type of industry. And it was really trying to help people come in, be positive, focus on what we can control, and make the best of it. Like, how can we optimize ourselves so we can optimize our teams and those that depend on us, whether that's the vulnerable community or whether that's our families, those we care about in all these different ways. And so, again, I will say another clear thank you, and I'll probably say another thank you at the end. But if I don't, know that I am feeling it. So with episode 300, I might start off with a quote from 300, the movie that spurned from the very popular Frank Miller graphic novel that is sitting on the wall behind me. Fantastic artwork, fantastic story based on a true historical account. And if you're unfamiliar with the story of the 300 Spartans that held off the Persian army at Thermopylae against all odds, against thousands, because they had mindset, strategy, preparation, leadership, values, sacrifice, sense of duty, we could go on and on. Because of all those things, the Greeks stood a chance and they were able to come back uh, and hold off the Persians following that. But out of all the quotes from 300, what I will share is the scene where the Persian messenger is warning the Spartans like they need to surrender, they need to accept their fate to be enslaved, and talking about the might of their army, all their soldiers, how many archers they have, and how they'll have so many arrows shot through the air coming down upon the Spartans that their arrows will blot out the sun. And to which a Spartan replies, "Then we will fight in the shade." And that is where we'll open this episode. For this episode, I thought I would share 10 tips, 10 insights from the development journey that I've been on through my career. A lot of it spurned alongside the learnings in Blue Grit Radio, in the different endeavors, in partnerships and associations I've been involved in. And I'm not talking about like capital A associations for all of them. I'm talking about lowercase associations, like people I've been able to meet, learn with, be students in the game of police profession, of wellness, of leadership, of community building, all these things that are very pertinent in this show. So I have 10 tips, but I've kind of broken it up to 5 concepts that I honed in to be a little bit more illustrative of what insights I've gained through this process, and that's my career as well. I'm on year, I guess technically finished 18, and so 19, I suppose. But the 5 tips that are really focused on illustrating all the learnings I've had in career and life, and then 5 more quick tips that I will share out. So the first 5 are a little bit more curated, a little bit more detailed, and the second 5 are what I came up with shooting from the hip and shooting from the heart, in true hopes that wherever this reaches you, it is going to help you focus on what's important and what I've found to be most important and things I'm continuing to work on. So here we go. Number 1, it's master the inner game before the outer game. And what do I mean by that? If you've been listening along and following along and reading along in articles on Police One or the newsletter Good Grit, I've retitled it Good Grit, like that's good grit, then you know that my strict belief and that of many, many other high achievers and service oriented folks are you got to lead yourself first. That's why I developed a training called Lead Yourself Well. It all starts with you. Your whole life, you are the center of it. And it's not to be self centered, it's just to be factual. Like you control you. And so you control what you can control. That's your thoughts, reactions, your effort, your own expectations of self, like your quote unquote standards. Like if the standards of your team or your organization are not super high, well, raise yours up and model that, right? That's what you can control. We can influence, we can work to influence, but when we think about control truly, it's really only you and it's not all aspects of you. There are some things outside of our control. So we focus on what we can control. Let's not outsource our emotions. That's a phrase I've been playing with lately because outsourcing is just getting rid of ownership. We're just shipping away. We're like, hey, you take care of this thing, right? Do you want to outsource how you feel about things? You want to outsource how you feel about your work, how you feel about your day-to-day grind to the people around you, to the negative emotions projected upon you, to the negative narratives? I don't. It's a lot easier said than done, but I certainly don't. And so what do? You keep working on mastering your inner game. You keep working on self-mastery, self-discipline, self-development. So by leading yourself, focusing on you, you can continue to build yourself up. And that's what is going to take us into the second tip. And that's build your ship right. Build your ship right. If you know me, you know I'm not a nautical dude. I didn't grow up on boats. I'm not a sailor. I'm not any type of I suppose mariner to give a little nod to the local MLB team. But it is a metaphor that I've heard before. I'm sure you've heard before. When you talk about uh, ships are built to be at sea, not in port, right? So, what does that bring up in me? It brings up this metaphor of resilience. And we need to build ourselves. So, that's our bodies, our minds, our emotional resolve for the storm. Life is a storm. And if you choose a high paced, high stress job, like first responder work, like frontline responder work, then you are readily accepting that that storm is going to be there. There's going to be a frequency and volume of storms. And so you know that. And knowing that, there's a lot we ought to do and a lot we absolutely can do daily, weekly, monthly, yearly to make sure that we are building our resolve. We're building our durability. That's physically, mentally, otherwise, so that we have a ship that can endure. And I've thought about, I suppose I've been working on like a little blog or article using this metaphor. And so I started learning a little bit about shipbuilding. Like, what are some main tenets that people need to keep in mind when building a ship for someone that didn't grow up getting on a fishing vessel or woodworking or even paddling a canoe? And one of the main things is you got to start with the keel. Everything's oriented off the keel. And so we can quickly recognize how important it is to start your foundation right, whatever metaphor you want to use. But for me, that is your values. That's your mission. It's something I've talked ad nauseum about on here. I've talked about in trainings. I've talked about in writing. You need to know what you're about. You need to know what your personal goal, your personal mission is, and orient off of that. Build your life around that. Build your circles around that. Build your priorities and your routines around that. And wellness, all these different facets will fit in, support, and elevate that goal, that mission. Similarly, in modern ships and modern boating, there's a lot of mechanisms like electrical, like systems, like especially large ships to essentially like combat problems, right? Whether it's a leaking hull or something like that. So when I hear about those systems and how they have to be there for preparation, I mean, you got lifeboats on large ships. You have all these contingencies. It makes me think more about how you can think about this metaphor of a ship and how you're going to ready yourself for the storm or for the catastrophe, right? I know a lot of first responders, many that I'm proud to call colleagues and friends, and a storm hit them. Um, a hurricane basically came across their ship and capsized that thing. And a lot of times it's not the career at all. Sometimes it's a medical diagnosis of themselves or their family members, their kid. And so you think about building a ship right. You do it because you might need it. And you do it because you know that's going to improve your confidence in what you're doing, which is this thing called life. Are you looking for help with your rest and recovery, wanting to optimize your sleep and prime performance? Well, New Calm is built on neuroscience, and it's been used by special operators, SportTAC, pro sports teams, and many, many more for years. To learn more and access the best deals of the year, go to newcalm.co/grit. That's Newcalm, NUCALM.co/grit. Talked about mission and values in the last one. So number 3 is prove your values with your habits. Prove your values with your habits. A lot of us know what our values are. We could say them in a little round table. We could write them down if given 5 minutes. I think a lot of us would start with things like family, like our priorities. We value family. We value our friendships. We value service. And then we might even go into maybe character traits and ideals like integrity, honesty, fairness, freedom, liberty, things of that nature, personal ownership. That's great. I think those are fantastic exercises. I think that the next piece is really being critical and looking inward, like hold that mirror up and reflect. Is my life depicting those values? Are my habits illustrating that those values are very much present and they are of top priority? Could someone in my circles, like inner circles, examine my life and be able to describe pretty closely what my values are? What about someone farther out, mid circle? What about outer circle? What about someone that just met you and spent like the next 30 minutes with you in a meeting? Would they have any idea of what your values are by virtue of how you conduct yourself, by virtue of how you live your life? If someone opened up your schedule, your Google Calendar or what have you, your schedule on your phone, would they have any idea what your values are by virtue of how you prioritize your life, how you run your life? If there's a body cam, omitting all personal information or sensitive stuff, and you're wearing it through your whole day, and let's just say no one watched it, but there was a AI summary of the time spent doing different tasks, who you interacted with, what devices you were on, what activities you were doing. Would those illustrate your values? Would they be in alignment? Would it be confusing if we read this list of values and then we looked at your life and your schedule? You know, you say you value family, and yet you've been on your phone all day long, and your work phone, and you're not even at work, and it's not an emergency. You're just sucked into a conversation and trying to be helpful, which is great. It's well intended, but does it actually illustrate what you're about? You say you value wellness and health and vitality. You say you want to play with your grandkids without, joints aching. And yet, for the last 2 days, you've been too busy to work out, to go on a walk, to go on a jog, to do any push ups at home, even though the work schedule's tough and your kids have sports and things. It's no judgment, but are your habits speaking to your values? Are your actions speaking louder? Are you modeling your values? Could someone see them? And if you've been on this ride with me for a little bit, you know that this is not coming from blame or shame. It is coming from invitation. It's a challenge slash invitation, depending on what potency you're willing to accept. And a lot of these, I don't just come up with them because I think that they'd be great to just throw at people. These are things that I continually grapple with, and things that I'm very proud that I've been able to navigate a lot better at this stage in my life than 5 years ago, and 10 years ago, and 15 years ago, and 20 years ago, and so on. It's a work in progress. And so that's where I'm truly inviting you to come along and share in this conversation, LinkedIn posts, whatever means you want to share, or you hear something, you don't even got to talk about where you heard it, but talk about it with your friends, talk about it with your colleagues, because that's the point. It's about community building and elevating ourselves and everyone around us to a higher standard, because not just because, but because we can serve and live better. Number 4, define your identity on your own terms. We've talked about it probably through the course of the show as far as your job identity and making sure and doing what we can to prevent the creep, to prevent the oversaturation of this job being the entirety of our identity. But we've talked way more specifically lately, and we even have more episodes that will air around this time to that effect, and probably just after. But define your identity on your own terms. And so recognize that the roles, the hats, all these things we wear are not us. They're things we do. And they're a big deal. They're really great things. It's not to downplay anyone's commitment to service in career fields like ours, but they cannot and will not make up the entirety of you. And if you do try to or don't prevent that from happening, let me rephrase that. If you try to make it your whole being, you will absolutely sacrifice other things. And it's likely one of those values you spoke of earlier, like family, friends, right? Community. you let the job be your all, then it will be absolutely until it's not. And the until it's not will happen. Sooner or later, it absolutely will happen. So careers end, injuries happen, physical, mental, otherwise. Sometimes it's not our choice, right? Going back to recognizing our degrees of control. And then ultimately, even in a very healthy, fruitful career, even with good quote unquote life management, life balance, where people do have strong relations with their family members, they were able to compartmentalize and prioritize and toggle these different switches. If the job's not just one aspect of you, that retirement is going to be absolutely terrifying and paralyzing. And don't take it from me, take it from many of the guests that are on here, many of the guests on a lot of fantastic shows, some shows run by retired first responders, firefighters, cops, you name it. And they share their story, they share the stories of others, and it's very much a thing. So, again, with the key theme of not outsourcing our lives, let's not outsource our identity. Let's define it. Let's do it ourselves. Let's recognize the things we do are things we do, not they're not us, right? They comprise things that we care about, but ultimately, who are we? Who are we without the uniform, without the badge, without the bunker gear, without the certifications, without the rank, without the role, without the title, without the letters before or after your name? Who are you at your base? And that goes back to values and mission. Number 5 is be forever a student. I've always loved learning in one aspect or another, whether it's academically, that kind of went up and down depending on whether I was good at it or whether it felt like a big priority for me. But if I'm honest with myself, I've always looked back and there's been things that would fascinate me and I would gravitate towards them and I would just dive into them. And police work was one of them, especially early on and at different phases in my career when I was trying to just soak up as much as I can about or could about a certain discipline, a certain specialty, a certain aspect or tactic or strategy or role in the job. And that still continues. But by being forever a student, you recognize this extreme humility that has to come with being a student. You have to be bad at stuff. And I've even enjoyed and kind of pushed different hobbies on myself to try out because ultimately you're new at anything, you're really bad at it. And that can be things with fitness, that can be things with working out, just learning a new movement or trying a different training method. It's all in the pursuit of recognizing humility and the steady, patient development of yourself, right? So by doing that, you can essentially embody this like relentless, lifelong learning, checking the ego, and recognize that you're never going to be done. I love the quote and the concept that the more you learn, the less you know, because you become more acutely aware of how little you know in the grand scheme of things. And I think that that is such a uniquely beautiful aspect of life and how we can look at life because we're never going to quote unquote arrive. And I think you could really double down when it comes to things like rank and these titles and labels. A doctor, does a doctor know more than a non-doctor? Well, it really depends. It really depends on perspective. There's people in academia, they know a lot, and there's people with lived experience working in the trenches of whatever field, and they certainly know a lot. And I think the goal is not to say one's better than the other, but the goal is to recognize that both have a ton more to learn and they'll never quote unquote arrive. The best we can do is the best we can do and stay humble in that effort. So here's my 5. So that was the first 5 that were a little bit more charred out, and the last 5 are going to be a little bit quicker dose. And I hope that they resonate with you. They definitely stick out to me when I was reflecting and jotting some quick things down. There's not a whole lot of explanation with them, and so they are essentially tips like what would I say to a younger me, and what would I say to myself? What does tomorrow me wish that yesterday me could grapple with just a little bit better? So here those are. The first one of them is impermanence allows perfection. And what I mean by that is by allowing imperfection is really empowering. Our lives are not permanent. Our careers are not permanent. Today is not permanent. Nothing's permanent. And so if you are someone that is by nature a perfectionist, then you could really use this thing because it is very helpful to me. And it has been helpful to me without this clear phrase, but with the concept. And that is recognizing there is such thing as good enough, especially for those young leaders or those young first responders or people working in a critical field. You have to make critical decisions really quickly. You got to ship it when it's pretty good. You don't have the time, liberty. You don't have the opportunity to weigh out all these options and build a spreadsheet or weigh out all these pros and cons and phone a friend. A lot of times you do, but sometimes you don't. And so by recognizing the impermanence of things, then that allows you to lean into confidence and make that pretty good decision. And ultimately, you got to roll with it. And there's going to be downstream effects either way, and you got to roll with those. Number two is going to be lean into your authenticity. We come through life and we are shaped by our experiences, by our environments, um, by these systems and authority figures that tell us how it is. A lot of times they mean well, and sometimes it's really helpful, and sometimes it's not super helpful. And that really is context dependent on who you are, how you came up, etc. But that continues on through life, and so this is a nod to recognizing that there are so many influences we can learn from. Some we learn that's what I want more of, some we learn that's what I want less of. But ultimately, you are a unique you. And the better you recognize that and highlight all your greatest strengths and continue to work on all your unique challenges or deficiencies, that's how you're going to get across. That's how you're going to be as effective as possible. It's not becoming someone else. It's not trying to mimic someone else. We can learn from others, absolutely, but the more you are your authentic best parts of you, then that is how you're going to shine as an individual, as a team member, as a leader. I wish I recognized that sooner. And again, it's still a work in progress. Number three of this back five, I guess you could call it, keep creating boldly. This is really a nod to creativity. I found myself to be a very creative kid, and coming into this profession, I did not recognize the ability to be creative in it. So I thought it was largely rigid and very conformity focused. However, without being rebellious, without being anti-establishment, I found that allowing myself to be me, and with the last point, and allowing myself to be creative, man, the my brain fired up. I was able to bring more energy to the teams I was working with. There were some roles that were very specifically uh, built in a certain way that it felt like there was more allowance for that, such as community engagement, neighborhood response kind of role, as well as recruiting. Like we can recognize the creativity involved with that. However, although it's not obvious, there's a lot of ways that we can bring creativity to our work, to our lives, even in these more traditional kind of rank and file roles. And truly, creativity is what's necessary for innovation, for growth, for progress, forward thinking. Like you don't have to be right, but you have to be curious and you have to be creative to come up with solutions for a very dynamic world. I mean, we don't live in a static world, so we can't continue to exist with static energy and themes. So that's number three. Number four of this second set of five is protect your peace. So a lot of us have so much going on. We have work, we have these schedules, we have shift work, we have our phones, we have our other phones, we have all these different responsibilities, we have our family, friends, we have sports, we have news, we have world news, local news. All these things are really stressing us out. We have obligations, community groups, faith groups. We have our kids' obligations, sports. We have parent teacher conferences. We have this kid's doing great. This kid's not doing so great. We have parent stuff. Man, the list goes on and on. Unless we actually find some way to protect our peace in even these little small doses, and that goes right into wellness, that goes right into keeping yourself steady, taking care of you, right? Lead yourself, then we're not going to have any peace. And so I invite you to consider some of the things we've talked about before on the show, whether that's putting the phone on airplane mode when you can for 5-10 minutes, or just leaving it in the other room. Um, Going on a walk, not looking at your phone, not wearing headphones, not letting any sound or buzz kind of interrupt your flow or what you're doing, whether it's being in nature, which I commonly hear from all kinds of people. Like that's what people say in a crowded auditorium when they talk about what keeps them steady and balanced. Nature, working out, family, playing with their kids. These are the very, very common things. So let's protect our peace. Let's make sure that those things are as uninterrupted as practical. And number 5 of this shoot from the hip, shoot from the heart list, recognize that these are the good old days. I was recently interviewed on another podcast, and the host asked me specifically about Diego, and it was a great opportunity to kind of just take some quick inventory on all of these things I'm doing that are public facing. I don't think I'd be doing any of them if not for his example and trying to build off his legacy. And so when we lost Diego, for me, it was a huge recognition that you know, those were the good old days with him here. Uh, but nothing's guaranteed, to go back to that earlier point. Nothing is permanent. And so we got to recognize like these are the good old days. Um, there's a there's an author I was turned on to. He's a depth psychologist and environmental advocate, survivalist, wilderness dude, Bill Plotkin. So shout out to Matt Domyancic for that recommendation as well. Um, and he has this a couple books. One of them Soulcraft, but there's one that talks about these phases of life. It kind of talks about childhood, right? You're kind of in this wandering phase, and then you go through this like kind of cocoon phase, right? Because you're kind of going inward and you're kind of figuring out who you are. And then when you come out of the cocoon, like a lot of people can imagine, you're really in this next stage of life. And it goes on and on through these metaphors and archetypes. But one thing I loved about it, and it took me a little bit to recognize it, was after each chapter and section, he said, "Man, those were the best years of my life, or those were the best times." And he would have like a different phrase, essentially nodding to the fact that that chapter was the best. And I think this might resonate with people if you think about it, right? Like in some of my college years, some of those friendships and those bonds and those hilarious memories, like those were the good old days. But man, like going through academy, the fun you never want to have again, being new and so excited and this buzz to do this thing that you've been working so hard for and waiting so long for, and then graduating, like that was another version of the good old days. And then rolling with a crew, like you're the ride or die types that you take on as battle buddies in your formative younger years, like for sure those were the good old days. But when we were expecting my daughter and a bunch of the fellas and team went to DC for police week, like for sure I was bummed that I wasn't going to be there in person to be able to remember and honor Diego that year. But at the same time, like I was waiting for my baby girl to come, and I'd wanted that like my whole life, to be a dad. And so like just waiting for that and not being over there and not feeling FOMO because I had this other thing right here that was my priority, right? And I know Diego would know, being a father himself, and a lot of that energy, I am inspired by how I observed his fatherhood in crafting my own. And so those are the good old days. And like when she was a baby, it was the good old days. And then when she was walking, and then now she's like having all these independent thoughts and interests and saying these really, really intellectually uh, intriguing things and hilarious things. And she's developing her own personality that she's had from the beginning. Like that's the good old days. And, even at work, I invite people that are middle managers to focus on the small wins, because if you don't, you're going to feel like there's you're going to feel like there's none sometimes. But it's necessary work, and supporting your team in the way that you can do it, and supporting the community from the seat that you're in. Like I have to recognize there's aspects of these being the good old days, and it might be really hard to find them, but that is the intention. I think that we all could use a little bit more of, and I certainly could use more of at some times. So there are the 10 tips. I did 5 and 5, kind of in a different theme. So I hope this was helpful to you. I would love your feedback. I'd love your thoughts. If this generates something in you, shoot me a line on Instagram or LinkedIn. Blue Grit Wellness on Instagram. LinkedIn is just my first and last name, Eric Tung, or email bluegritwellness@gmail.com. I love your thoughts and feedback. It's one of my favorite things to open up in the inbox is when after a good grit email newsletter, someone chimes in like how that was really helpful for them. Like it hit a nerve on something that they're working on or working through. That's the point. Like it's to build community. It's to build connection. It's to bring positive, constructive ideas so we can all be better. So I didn't forget. Thank you, thank you, thank you again for being a part of this Blue Grit community. I appreciate you so much, and stay safe, stay well, stay gritty. Thank you for tuning into another episode of Blue Grit Radio. As always, support this community by subscribing, giving us a 5-star review, and following, liking, and sharing posts on Blue Grit Wellness on Instagram. You can reach me there or email me at bluegritwellness@gmail.com. Be well and stay gritty.